welcome to my channel. My name is Carmelita and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And if you've stumbled upon my channel and you don't know who I am, what I do here is I just do a bunch of different creative coping skills that people have used or might use in their personal life to help cope with different, whatever they're going through, depression, anxiety, things like that. Here I am hand knitting, and so I'll be doing my hand knitting video as I talk about today's topic. Usually I share a topic specifically to talk about my voiceovers. So, y'all, if you have been here for a while, you can see that my hand blanket has grown and I'm kind of getting the hang of it. I'm excited about that. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the book of Job and how you can use that as a support for your mental health. Why am I talking about biblical content as a therapist? It's because I'm a Christian and I do have Christian clients. Not all my clients are Christian, but some of them are. And the topic of the Bible and their religion does come up. And so I think that this is a helpful resource. I don't think a lot of therapists are out there talking about this as in specific detail. So I want to be able to give people ideas of how to use your religion, if you're a Christian specifically, because that's what I'm familiar with personally. But yeah, how you can use the Bible to help as support for your mental health. So today I'm talking about Job. I love the book of Job. I always recommend it to anyone, not really, or not just as a professional, but even my personal life, who's going through a hard time or suffering. I've read it multiple times. It has helped me through a lot of hard times in life. So I'm going to share 7 key takeaways to look at when you're reading through Job. And if you haven't read through Job, maybe this is motivation for you to read those things, or to read Job. So the number one thing that I wrote down is that suffering is a normal part of life. This is a concept that is actually taught in dialectical behavioral therapy. One of the things I heard this in a sermon a few months ago, maybe it was sometime last year, but there was a study done or something where they found that people that lived in this one culture, don't know what it was, don't remember, I'm just calling it off from my memory, they had a higher pain tolerance than Western people, so Americans, Canadians, etc. A higher pain tolerance. Like, they didn't need as much medication as we did. They didn't have a high level of anxiety and depression and things like that. Of course, every culture has its own challenges, but the study specifically focused on that. So the pastor was using that to discuss how a lot of times, in American society specifically, we try to stay as comfortable as possible. We try to run away from any discomfort. If something makes us uncomfortable or something is painful, we run away from it, or we try to enforce our will to make it so that we can be comfortable. I think we're seeing that quite a lot in today's society on a massive scale. And so one thing that Job teaches us and reminds us is that suffering is a normal part of life. It's not something to run away from, it's something to accept and actually embrace as part of your living. Number 2 thing, there's nothing wrong with being depressed or grief or sadness. One thing we see throughout Job is that he is obviously depressed and in grief and in sadness, and a lot of times when we meet people who are feeling that way, we try to make them feel better instead of just sitting with them and letting them feel their feelings. And their feelings are valid. It's okay to feel that way, and Job kind of reminds us of that. The number 3 thing is, for me, this was something that stuck out. Job cursed the day that he was born and asked God to end him because he wanted to die. Thoughts of wanting to die are normal in suffering. I'm not saying suicidal thoughts are normal. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying a lot of people wish they didn't exist or wish they would just not wake up. That doesn't mean that you want to off yourself. It just means that you wish you weren't here or that you wish your life would just end. And that's a normal part of suffering as well. because what is an escape from your pain? If you can't physically leave the suffering, then the escape would be, would be no more life, right? So that makes logical sense. I'm not saying, it's totally, if you feel that way, don't get help. No, I'm not saying that at all. Definitely get help. But what I am saying is that a lot of times people get very uncomfortable when people are honest about wanting to not be alive. And as a therapist, I hear it. So maybe I'm desensitized to it a little bit. I don't know. But I thought about this, and I think a lot of people have had this feeling, and I think a lot of people just don't mention it because people don't know how other people are going to react. Like, are you going to have me committed into some kind of institution? I'm not suicidal. I just don't want to be alive. Those two things are different. So it's totally, I want to validate that feeling and give you that space, Number 4, God can and will help us through suffering. Just because we want to die doesn't mean we should. And it doesn't mean it's our time to die. Pain is temporary. That's an important thing to remind ourselves of when we are feeling the feelings that I mentioned of not wanting to be alive. Just because we don't want to be doesn't mean we shouldn't be. It doesn't mean our time here is up. It doesn't mean that we're through here. We're still here and breathing. We still have a reason for that. Number 5, God is in control. So we see in Job that God has the power to give Job back. Well, he doesn't give him back all that he lost, but he gives him more than what he lost, right? But this is something that I struggle with. And I'll talk about that when I talk about number 7. But the point is, God is in control. Number 6 is God allows suffering. He doesn't try to keep us from it. This is so important because I think a lot of Christians who, especially, honestly, they're not reading their Bible, they're not going to church, they're not really in the Word, but they're Christians. They kind of miss the point. They think that if they do the right things, or if they basically are just good, maybe do some prayers every now and then, go to church on Christmas and Easter, then they'll be fine. And God will give them what they need and everything, they'll have good lives. But that's not what the Bible promises, actually. God does promise that we will suffer here. Jesus says that. And he suffered. If you need any other proof that we're here and we're going to suffer and we're going to keep suffering, think about Jesus. That is supposed to be the Son of God, right? Well, he was down here. He suffered way more than a lot of us are suffering, and so obviously if he suffered, we're gonna suffer too, right? Okay, so suffering is something God allows. He doesn't try to keep us from it, and he allows it because, and this is something I think that's mentioned by Paul, but this is not in Job, but he does that because in him we're strong. So in our weakness, he is strong. And I didn't get that before when I was younger, but basically what that means is that God gives us strength. We get strength from suffering. If you think about the times in your life where everything was going great and wonderful and awesome and you got everything you wanted in life, for the most part, how was your spiritual life? Were you reading your Bible every day? Were you praying every day? Were you going to church? What kind of music were you listening to? What were you doing with your free time? I can tell you for me, that when I'm going through a hard time, I'm praying more often, I'm reading my Bible more often, I'm really listening at church, I'm really listening to gospel music a lot more, when I'm happy, and everything's great. To be honest, I am still going to church every week, but I might skip a few days of reading the Bible, I might forget to journal a few days. I journal prayers. And so my spiritual life looks different. It still probably looks pretty good. However, it's not nearly as ingrained into my daily activities as when I am going through difficult times. So that is something to think about. That's kind of how a lot of us are. The next one that I have written here is to check your arrogance and your own will at the door. So if Job kind of rubs you the wrong way because God allows Satan, right, to destroy Job's life just to prove a point, It is a hard pill to swallow, but God says in the Old Testament repeatedly, who is the clay to question the potter? Basically, who are you to tell me what to do or to ask me questions? It is by my own grace and mercy that I even answer your questions. So, so you have no rights to tell me anything. And so that may sound like, oh my gosh, who would want to, deal with a God like that? But that is who God is. He is all powerful. He is all knowing. And we need to trust in him and his will. I'm going to read to you the note that I have written here. Check your own will and arrogance. Job can be a big dry pill to swallow because we see God allows Satan to destroy his life simply to prove that Job is faithful. At first read, this enraged me as a teen and I couldn't understand it. Now that I'm older and I've been through more life and have grown spiritually, I realize that this was my own arrogance. Throughout the Old Testament, God says, who is the clay to ask the potter what it's doing or what he's doing? As in, we have no right to question his will. We did not create ourselves or the earth we live on. Our knowledge is limited to our own understanding and not the understanding of things bigger than what we have seen or experienced. And most of us can admit humbly that we do not know all that there is to know in all the universe. But God does, and he knows the role he has for his believers. We're given pieces of a puzzle we are not worthy to see the full picture of. I also think the anger I felt at first when I read Job for the first time came from anxiety and a lack of trust and fear of pain. So I have in quotations, what do you mean? I could do everything right and still suffer greatly. Since then, my trust in God has grown deeper and more strongly, and it's actually through suffering and discomfort that my trust grows. So that was basically what I wrote for number 7. So there are some things that I'm just not going to understand. And maybe when I see God one day, I can ask him, hey, what was it with the Job, why'd you do that? Like, it's still hard for me to wrap my head around, but I'm not going to undermine the fact that it has helped me get through a lot of times. It's helped me get through depression and anxiety in college. It's helped me get through my first miscarriage and just many times where I'm feeling very in a very dark place. And so maybe that was the purpose, because he knew that it was going to impact millions or billions or trillions of people to read the story. I don't know what the purpose was, and I'll ask God one day. Maybe you will too. But the fact is that the story is very powerful and impactful, and so I definitely recommend it as a read for you to use for your mental health and your mental well-being as you're going through difficult times. Realizing that suffering is normal, and you're not alone in your suffering, and God will get you through the suffering, and he works all things out for your good. At the end of the story, we see that Job has a new family, he has a new wealth and things like that. For me as a mom, it's still kind of okay, but the lives lost can never be replaced, in my opinion. And that part's hard, I'm not even gonna lie. However, God provided for him, and his family is safe and happily in heaven, and so they're not suffering, but yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow. Job is, but it also has a lot of helpful messages about grief and suffering and loss and faith. We see Job, his faith even kind of he still believes and trusts in God, but his faith in his own life and well-being and his purpose is all shaken and challenged, and you see a lot of that doubt, and all of that is normal. So it kind of helps to validate us when we're feeling low, because a lot of times, like I said, in real life, people want to make us feel better instead of like just letting us feel and just validating our feelings. And I think Job gives us that validation without other people having to do that for us, especially if they haven't been through the kind of suffering we're going through. So anyways, I hope you thought that video was helpful. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Like and subscribe if you would like to, if you like this video and if you'd like to see more content. Thanks for joining in, and peace be with you.